Open world exploration is a genre that over the years has gone pretty stagnant. Not all the releases over the years have been bad, but I think the genre has seen better days. Bethesda has always been one of the open world kingpins for the past decade. In that past decade, Bethesda has only released 2 games actually worth your money, but that's a conversation for a different day. And it seems that Todd Howard is finally done trying to sell us Skyrim for the 4th time, and Bethesda has finally released its brand new IP, Starfield. The one thing I wanted as a kid was an open world game that took place in space, and let's just say the last attempt to do a game like this didn't go so well. Despite my obvious skepticism, I bought Starfield on day 1, and at the time of me writing the script, I've already dumped in 82 hours into the game. And I must say, this game is fun. I think it does a lot of things very well, but this game also has a lot of issues. Let's cut the rambling and get right into it. Welcome to my review of Starfield. Right off the jump, the first thing that Starfield does really well is their character customization. It's a noticeable improvement from Skyrim and Fallout. The actual character customization is cool, but what I liked was the background and trait system. It adds a whole other layer to the customization, and some of the traits are actually really cool. Some of these traits will give you access to some special dialogue options, which again I think is really neat, and choosing a certain background will give you early access to some perks, which is great for building a character that fits your playstyle. The core gameplay in Starfield is exactly what you would expect from a Bethesda game. The gunplay, movement, looting, it's all the same janky fundamentals that Bethesda has always been known for. Though it should be noted that they finally changed the lockpicking minigame. In typical Bethesda fashion, as soon as you finish the first mission, you hop on a ship and explore while ignoring the main story almost completely. At least that's what I did. And this segues perfectly into another praise I have for Starfield. The ships in this game are really cool and the ship customization is great. They look badass and there's a lot of depth when it comes to designing your ship. Everything from the weapon to the engine is free to be upgraded or moved around however you want. However, this leads to one of the major problems with Starfield. Exploration in space is a massive disappointment. Unlike this game's distant and mentally retarded cousin, you cannot fly into a planet and land on it yourself. If you want to land on a planet or go to a different solar system, you must travel to it via a loading screen. And the worst part is, you cannot fast travel to a location that you haven't discovered. So, if you want to explore a planet in a solar system that you haven't discovered yet, you have to fast travel to the solar system, and then fast travel onto the planet. In other words, you have to endure back-to-back loading screens every time you want to explore a new location. And as you can guess, it gets repetitive, rather fast. Now you're probably wondering, why can I manually land on a planet in No Man's Sky, but I can't do it in Starfield? We'll get to that later, but with that said, this game will have you going through more loading screens than both Fallout and Skyrim combined. Space in this game doesn't feel like a place to fly around and explore. It instead feels a lot like the Hunter's Dream from Bloodborne, an unnecessary roadblock that you must endure every time you travel to a new location. And if you thought the space exploration was a disappointment, then I'm sorry to say that the planet exploration isn't much better. The big issue with planet exploration is that it's both repetitive and flat out boring. By the 10-hour mark of the game, I started seeing the exact same science outpost, the exact same abandoned weapon station, the exact same research tower. Most of these planets have the exact same copy-paste enemy base for you to raid. And what makes it worse is that sometimes the game can't be bothered to land you right next to it, so you have to run anywhere between 100 to sometimes 1,000 meters just to get to your destination. It came to a point where I just started ignoring planets because exploring them just wasn't worth it. Most of these planets are just devoid of anything interesting. The cities in this game look very nice, however the shops and vendors aren't marked on the map, so you'll be doing a lot of walking trying to find the place you're looking for. Honestly, the most fun that came from exploring planets was just staring at the skyboxes. The overall exploration is probably the most disappointing part about this game. It's hard to even call it an open world game when every outpost and every planet and every solar system is only accessible by a loading screen. The gunplay feels almost exactly like Fallout, but instead of mini-nuke launchers, we get space lasers. Gunfights in low or zero gravity are a good change-up, and of course, having magic powers doesn't hurt either. Let's talk about that for a second. If you progress through the story enough, you'll eventually unlock the ability to harness power from certain planets and use them in combat. They're basically this game's version of Skyrim shouts. These powers range from powerful waves that knock back enemies to complete invisibility. Again, I do like this mechanic, but the problem is acquiring these powers is insanely repetitive. You scan a planet and then land at the scanner anomaly, and then you follow the distortion for a few minutes until you see a temple in the distance, you then enter the temple, and then you must fly through these glowing orbs. Do that enough times and you'll eventually access a new power. You have to do this every single time. And trust me, it gets old really fucking quick. And while some of these powers are really cool, a lot of them are just ripped right out of Skyrim. You have Gravity Wave, which is just Fus Roda, Seeing Stars, which is Aura Whisper, and Bend Time, which is just Slow Time. That being said, these powers are still fun, and it helps this game from being just Fallout in space. Ship combat was fun early on, but it loses its magic the more you play. Enemy encounters in space play out the same way almost every single time. Immediately after you fast travel, spacers or bounty hunters will pull up and you fight them, and this is how every single space encounter goes. Unless you go the pirate route and just attack every ship on sight, and if you are that type of player, then enjoy being wanted across every solar system, but I must say, me personally, I don't enjoy that type of playstyle. Being able to dock ships and kill the entire crew and steal their ship is also a lot of fun, however, like the ship's combat, it gets boring after enough hours. Being able to reroute power mid-combat does sound like a fun mechanic until you realize that pumping a ton of power into your weapons is the go-to strategy for space combat. You can also steal ships and add them to your fleet, which is one of the things that got me hooked onto Starfield in the first place, but considering how rudimentary the space traversal is in this game, there isn't much point to having multiple ships at a time, unless you plan on remodeling and upgrading all of your ships, which, if you are that type of player, then more power to you. Dialogue in Starfield has taken a step up from the prior Bethesda games. Sure, that's not exactly a high bar, but it's still worthy of praise. They brought back the silent protagonist, which, by the way, great choice. And of all the new things added to the dialogue and interactions, the persuasion perk is the one I want to talk about, because this perk is just way too good. This perk unlocks this negotiation minigame where you pick certain dialogue options. Some of these options have a higher risk of failing, but grant the most points if successful. Aside from being almost 100% RNG, the main issue is that this perk, even at a low level, is way too good. Even at level 20, it was very easy to avoid confrontations by simply talking my way out of every bad situation, to the point where it became kinda comical. This is where the classic Bethesda writing rears its ugly head when I was able to convince this manager lady to give me a very expensive trophy for absolutely no reason. Leveling up the perk unlocks other negotiation skills like bribing and intimidation, which makes talking your way through missions even easier. Overall, I did enjoy the change up in the dialogue system, but that doesn't make it great or even good for that matter. Looting in this game also feels a tad underwhelming. Even if you find a purple or yellow item, the modifications are oftentimes not that powerful. What does not help with that is the fact that most item drops in this game are completely randomized, and of course Bethesda brought back the good old encumbrance mechanic, meaning if you're like me and you love to take everything with even minimal value, then you have to do a lot of walking. Items in your inventory can be stored on your ship, however, your ship can only carry so many items in the cargo hold at a time. Because of this, you're forced to swap items and resources back and forth between your companions, just like the Bethesda games of old. Resources in this game can be used to craft weapons and armor mods, as well as base building. Personally, I never enjoyed the base building, even in Fallout 4, but for those who do enjoy that type of stuff, then I'm sure you're going to love this game's base building. You can build an outpost anywhere on any planet you want. These outposts can be used to store weapons and harness resources, and if that wasn't good enough, they finally added a top-down view. Why wasn't this added in Fallout 4? Seriously. Hey, it's better late than never, I guess. Certain planets will harness different types of resources, so you have to pick these planets as well as the specific outpost location wisely to get the maximum value, which I can appreciate. I personally am not into base building, however, I'm sure there are plenty of people who are, and those people will surely enjoy it. Another core issue with Starfield's gameplay is the enemy variety. The most common enemies you will fight in this game are spacers, pirates, ecliptic mercenaries, and religious zealots. Despite their names being different, these enemies are exactly the same, with the only difference being their weapons and armor. Yes, some planet wildlife can be hostile, however, hostile encounters with alien enemies were very rare, at least in my experience. There is seriously more enemy variety in Fallout 4 than there is in Starfield, which is kind of baffling considering the scale that Starfield is on when compared to Fallout 4. Starfield has a plethora of issues, however, the biggest problem with this game in my opinion is the engine that it runs on. I'm not gonna lie to you, when doing research for this review, I fully expected the engine used for Starfield was the exact same engine used for Skyrim, a game that came out almost 13 years ago. You can imagine my surprise when I found out that Starfield, in fact, runs on a different engine called the Creation Engine 2. Skyrim and Fallout 4 ran on the original Creation Engine. And this leads us right to the core problem with Starfield. Despite this game running on a modified and improved engine, it still feels and plays exactly like Bethesda games from years prior. Remember when I brought up how you can't manually land on planets? Why can't I do that here, but I can do it in a game like No Man's Sky? While I don't have the exact answer, if I had to make an educated guess, it's because the engine cannot support it. Also, despite being a new and improved engine, you're still prone to classic Bethesda silliness in this game, like the game autosaving when you're at a fraction of your health, NPCs giving you dead stares every time you interact with them, and rendering issues were present throughout the entire duration of the game. I could keep listing problems, but there's no point in doing that. Bugs like this should be expected when your game runs on an inadequate engine. Even with all of that said, I still enjoyed Starfield. The Bethesda cycle will always be fun for what it's worth, but that is exactly the problem with Starfield. This is Bethesda's first new IP in literally decades, and it doesn't do anything risky or push any boundaries. If you enjoy the Bethesda formula of open world games, then you're going to have fun. Because looking past all the flaws, I dumped 80 hours into this game and that has to count for something. But looking at this game as a whole, I can't help but be a little disappointed. There was a lot of potential here. Starfield could have been something generational considering that aside from Outer Wilds, there isn't any good space exploration games. While I did enjoy Starfield for what it was, it's impossible to ignore the tragic waste of potential here. Also, to sour the mood even more, they plan on using the Creation Engine 2 for Elder Scrolls 6. Fuck. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried.